I want to start by sharing a brief story about one of our Red Cross volunteers. Her name is Brooke Jarrett, and she's a lot like many of you. She's young, she's smart, and she loves technology and how it can help her solve problems. Brooke came to us wanting to join our volunteer disaster dispatch team. Now, here in the Chicago area, our volunteer dispatchers, working from anywhere, track and verify more than 2,800 incidents a year. We respond to about 1,200 of those. So think about this. 3 or 4 times a day, volunteers are responding to disasters across northern Illinois, primarily house fires, to ensure that anybody who's displaced has immediate access to shelter, food, clothing, medication, and emotional support. On Brooke's second day of training, a cold Saturday in late December, we were immediately faced with a difficult incident. An early morning domestic dispute between a boyfriend and girlfriend turned into a violent house fire. The incident spilled out into the front yard, waking up neighbors and sending all 4 residents, including 2 small children, to the emergency room. Brooke and I spent the next several hours marshaling our responders on scene and at the hospital. The communications became complex as we tried to keep our leadership, our media team, and our partners all up to date with what was going on. As the response continued into the afternoon, we learned that the girlfriend and one of her children didn't survive the fire. Upon hearing the news, I could see that Brooke was starting to tear up, and I became resigned to the thought that this might be the last time we see her as a volunteer. As the shift concluded, I thanked her for her resilience, and I told her I would follow up with her later that evening. In the response to the message I sent her, she acknowledged that it had been an extremely trying day, and yet thanked me for the opportunity. And then she surprised me. The last line of her email said this: "I hope you have a spot for me on your superhero team." When I read this, I immediately began to rethink how I approach my work. First, it's a powerful reminder that the most important thing you do when you work for the Red Cross is empower our volunteers, which make up 94% of our workforce. We empower our volunteers to do the most meaningful and important work. The second thing I realized, though, was that technology is changing volunteerism. It was possible for a volunteer to have a huge impact, yet never set foot on the scene of a disaster. This is a trend that we're starting to see across response. For example, remote support enabled by simple yet powerful technologies makes it possible for anyone to support a disaster. So when I think about this incident, and I think about our volunteers, starting to think of our volunteers as superheroes, I'm not necessarily looking for someone like Superman. What I start to think of, though, is somebody more like Batman, whose main superpower is knowing how to use really cool gadgets. So let me give you examples of 3 tools that we use that allow our volunteers to make a difference from anywhere in the world. The first is a web application called DCS Ops, short for Disaster Cycle Services Operations. DCS Ops was created by another young and talented volunteer named John Laxon, who writes amazing code from San Francisco. The application is simple to use. You can log in from any device, so our volunteers can use it from anywhere. But perhaps the best thing about the application is how it allows us to communicate simply just by text message. When our dispatchers see an incident, they quickly type up a recruitment message. They can blast it out to our volunteers by text. They can see everybody's availability sorted by distance and travel time. A yes reply will send out information about the incident as well as a link that will open up the volunteer's GPS application. When volunteers get on scene, they pick up their phone, they simply type "arrived," and it lets the dispatcher know that they're there safely. And when they're on scene, they're no longer hindered by making and taking phone calls. Instead, quick conversations to the side while they're working with clients allow them to communicate simply. It's my belief that technology has to enable rather than hinder if we're going to continue to recruit volunteers like Brooke and John. And now I can tell them, yes, we can get you to incidents faster, and when you're there, you can focus on doing the work that brought you to the Red Cross in the first place. So thinking about software development, we began to wonder, can this be an actual regular volunteer opportunity at our organization? So as a second example of how we're making it possible for our volunteers to have an impact from anywhere, I'd like to introduce you to the Already project. This effort is a unique collaboration between the Red Cross chapters in Chicago and Seattle, Microsoft, and a nonprofit called Humanitarian Toolbox. Think of Already as a community web app that will allow any organization to deliver preparedness services by replacing pen and paper with web and mobile applications. Our volunteers here, for example, will use it to help them manage the installation of thousands of free smoke alarms. Now, for us, this shift in thinking more towards resiliency is new for some of us because we always traditionally used to focus on the heroic act of disaster response. But when you think about our mission at the American Red Cross is to alleviate suffering. And isn't it equally noble for us to empower our volunteers to try to prevent suffering in the first place? If you think back to opportunities to volunteer in the past, they've mostly been manual labor tasks. But one of our volunteers, James Chambers, said this about his experience. He's a coder. He's a leader of 47 of our contributors to the Already project. He said about this, about his past experiences. He said, the only way for me to volunteer and help in any kind of humanitarian effort has been, well, put down the applications you use every day, put down anything that you know about working in your craft, and pick up power tools. And I'm like, nah, you don't have enough Band-Aids for me to build a house for someone. So if you have software skills, we now have an opportunity for you to contribute from anywhere you live. One of the things we've learned following the disasters in Haiti, in the Philippines, and Nepal is that the world is not as well mapped as we might assume. That makes providing emergency assistance extremely difficult. But now, in times of disaster, or simply of need, thanks to an effort from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team as well as an initiative called Missing Maps, volunteers around the world are getting together at mapathons, in their classrooms, perhaps around the dining room table to help map the world's most vulnerable communities. So let me give you an example. A partnership between 20 organizations, including the Red Cross, wanted to test a special sensor to see if it could have an impact in reducing fires in the slums of cities like Cape Town, South Africa. This is a project that would require something that the partnership didn't have if it was going to be successful, and those were maps. In a place like the Kalicha neighborhood in Cape Town, the shacks are packed closely together, the streets are narrow and crowded, and the houses don't have addresses. Cooking fires, unattended candles and lanterns, and bootleg electricity can cause catastrophic fires. These sensors, rather than detecting smoke, actually detect heat. And when there's a fire, can immediately send out a text message to everybody in the vicinity letting them know of the danger. When these sensors are sequenced together, they can actually send GPS coordinates to the local fire department. Without maps, the partnership decided to take the opportunity to crowdsource the mapping to volunteers around the world. So, if you can click a mouse, I can show you how to map in less time than it takes for me to deliver this talk. All you do is pick one of these squares and start tracing the buildings and the roads on satellite imagery. So we decided to do, one afternoon in our emergency operations center, we got everybody together and we started mapping the Kalicha neighborhood. Volunteers around the world were doing the same thing. And within a matter of weeks, hundreds of lines and boxes, small but meaningful gestures, all came together to create the base maps that would lead to the start of a successful project. So what have we learned? What have these experiences taught us as we learn how technology is changing volunteerism? The first is that software, grassroots software built by and for volunteers can be successful. In just a year and a half, 25% of Americans are now served by Red Cross chapters that use DCS Ops. This defies the conventional wisdom of most organizations that believe that a top-down enterprise-wide solution is the only way to build software. And we know this is confirmed when we talk to our volunteers who say that DCS Ops is the best Red Cross software they've ever used. The second lesson is that we've learned how to fail by thinking iteratively. And what do I mean by that? When you think and work iteratively, you take small steps. And so we build something, we test it, we scrap it and throw it away if necessary, and only until we get it right do we move on to the next step. Perhaps the best way I can explain this is to share a quote from the design team that built gov.uk, the collection of websites of the British government. In their design principles, they say, iteration reduces risk, it makes big failures unlikely, and turns small failures into lessons. Finally, the third thing that we've learned is that partnerships are essential. If I were to go to my leadership and ask them to support a project that we were going to do completely in-house, funded on our own, I would get a skeptical response. But if I present that same project, letting them know that we've engaged a partner like a Microsoft or a humanitarian toolbox or a Missing Maps, now all of a sudden the project becomes viable. Yes, partners bring resources to projects, but they bring something even more important, which is credibility. At a recent hackathon, Richard Campbell, the co-founder of Humanitarian Toolbox, said this. He said, software is a superpower. Getting all the superheroes to fly in the same direction, that's the trick. And so that's what I do now. Every day is I try to learn how to do that trick. I want to close with an admission. Despite everything that I've shown you, I'm actually not really a tech person. I'm not an engineer. I don't write code. I'm actually an architect. I spent 25 years trying to imagine things that other people couldn't see and then collaborating to try to get them built. And so the last lesson that I'd like to share with you is that when it comes to technology and volunteerism and humanitarian relief, you don't have to have a computer science degree to have a big impact. All you need is a little vision, a little time, perhaps a laptop computer, and a desire to be a superhero yourself. Thank you.